Grand Prix at Assen is always a special event. This year, round 7 of the championship, not just a Grand Prix really, rather a week of racing that becomes a family festival, pulls the biggest crowd for cars or bikes for the season and is held over 122.7 kilometres. This is the way they form up. Look at that convincing margin of Gardner over Kevin Magee, the Victorian in only his second Grand Prix. So it's two Australians, the two fastest qualifiers, ahead of Eddie Lawson, Ron Haslam, Rob McElnay and Christian Saron. Brilliant stuff from Magee there, near right of screen. Number 17. All in readiness, and they're away. And Magee goes absolutely nowhere. Haslam charges off, so too does Randy Mamola, and Gardner gets a pretty fair sort of a start, but Magee fades to nothing. And it is a gloomy grey day at Assen in Holland. He's at least 9th place as Mamola challenges on Haslam but can't get past him, and already somebody's off. He won't be the last one to crash today. Ron Haslam, and down goes Randy Mamola. But doesn't let go of the bike. Riding it to earth. And very keen to get back on it. And how do you keep your senses in that sort of situation? But that's exactly what Randy Mamola did. And Ron Haslam now, a little bit of breathing space out in front as the rain starts to fall and the crowd goes for shelter. There'll be close to 200,000 of them here. And the red flag out, so stop before the completion of one lap. So the bike's being flagged off, and it will be a total complete restart when the weather's made up its mind, and then the teams can make up their mind. So the crowd waits. And pit crews work. And some people get undressed. And Wayne Gardner, pole position holder, sticks with dry weather slick tyres. Hello, Wayne. And Eddie Lawson's regaled by Randy Mamola with tales of daring do. And I don't think he's lying. And just power to the crowd that packs in all round this circuit, and now ready for the total restart. 20 laps to be completed. Original grid positions. Can Magee get away better than the awful start he got previously? Gardner beside him. Lawson the other side, and they get away, and he fades again, but not as badly. And scything through from the second row comes Randy Mamola, out after Ron Haslam. Gardner gets a pretty fair sort of a start. So he's third, and Tyre is fourth, and McElnay's fifth. And Kevin Magee's sixth, tucked in behind him. So he's recovered quite well from the start, and Haslam breaks away. Just brilliant start after brilliant start, which well and truly earned him the nickname of Rocket Ron. And while he breaks, the Americans are at it again, Mamola and Lawson. 3 and 2. Both Yamahas, opposing companies, opposing teams. Kenny Roberts looking after Randy Mamola. Kel Carruthers, the Australian, looking after Eddie Lawson. And Haslam in the Elf team. Gigantic French company as Lawson's second and Gardner's fourth, and Kevin Magee in there is seventh. And down goes Raymond Roche, like number 8, the Cagiva. Thinks it's a good idea to continue, thinks about it again. Says no. I'll make myself comfortable. And he took a fairly heavy tumble, over a few times, kicked up again. Thought he could run at about 80 kilometres an hour. So went for another tumble. While Eddie Lawson and Ron Haslam and Wayne Gardner argue about the lead in very difficult circumstances. Gardner so close with the rear tyres, so light on the ground, and he gets past him, and so looms up now close to Eddie Lawson. Three backsides off the seat, three crooked legs sticking out. Have a look at this. Look at the rear tyres. Look at the fronts pressed down hard as they brake. And all the weight goes on the front wheel and then they peel in. And Haslam's knee surely must be somewhere around the rear wheel of Gardner's bike until it forges through. And Kevin Magee does the same to Randy Mamola. So he moves up to fourth place, Magee. Absolutely brilliant riding, backing up in his second qualifying position. He was third in qualifying in Japan in his first ever Grand Prix. Yatsushiro in trouble on 16 until he was pushed to sixth place on the grid, but there were only 0.06 of a second in it between three bikes. So Haslam leads Gardner, leads Lawson, from Magee fourth. So it's Australians second and fourth. Englishman leading and very nearly off, propped up just by his own knee. Gardner goes through to the lead and Lawson comes with him, and Haslam tucks down again and gets busy. And his mind back into gear. This is how it happened. The knee grazing the track. Planned, but that's not planned, as he then does prop himself up with the right knee. An unpleasant situation in the sense of both the knee hitting the ground, but also in terms of damn nearly crashing. Lawson now leads Gardner with rain falling. Things are treacherously slippery. And in fact, the leading riders sit up, Lawson and Gardner and now Haslam, and say, we're not racing. This is no spot for us. And certainly they haven't been told anything by officials. It's their own decision. But they're the ones that have to cope with the conditions, who know how dreadfully tricky it is. And although the officials haven't stopped it, it is raining more heavily than it was the first time they stopped the race at the end of that first lap. So on the sixth lap, they file back to the pits to a group of officials who didn't ask them to return. And they go back to their own teams with 5 laps completed in 20 scheduled, and the officials look and shrug and are not very impressed, except that the riders remind them that it's their necks, not the officials. And so they decide to count the time for the first 5 laps. They were on the 6th when they called in, and the remaining 15, and the cumulative time will determine the overall race positions. And a very patient crowd waits over a race that was spread over more than 3 hours. So the starting order, right to left, is Gardner, Lawson, Haslam, McElnay, Saron, Tyra, Magee, Mamola and Keeley in the finishing order of the first 5 laps. And again, it is a brilliant start by Haslam. Going with him well this time is Wayne Gardner in front of Eddie Lawson. And it's a better start also for Didier Radigues there on the Cagiva number 7. This time there is no question as Richard Scott goes off wide and avoid running into the fence. He had no option. He had to dump the bike in a wretched season of switching from a private Honda to a chance ride with the Lucky Strike team. And it really has been an unhappy time for the Kiwi and winner of our Castrol 6-hour race, Richard Scott. So now Gardner overtaken round the outside by the Dunlop shod Randy Mamola. Gardner on Michelin's, Eddie Lawson behind him on Michelin's, Honda and Yamaha. But it's this Yamaha on the Dunlops that proved to be so good, so dominant, with an enormous margin in Japan in the wet. And the man on the bike has such confidence too, and daring, and it's Burnett, and then it's de Radigues and Haslam and Mackenzie. And Keeley there getting tangled up on bike number 10, running off wide but somehow staying upright, letting through about 15 placings, but very lucky still to be in the race, as he was bumped into and all but brought down. Clear track in front of Momola on 3. Making a nice break from Lawson Gardner. But remember, Momola finished 8th in the first heat, and Rob Punt drops the bike. Dutch rider. And one feels that there'll be plenty that'll follow him. So Momola has to put in a fairly stunning performance here, finishing 13 seconds behind the leader at the end of the first heat, Wayne Gardner, and of course Eddie Lawson was quite close to him. And he's trying to put in that performance. Out, making a big break, big commitment for Randy Momola. Gardner, on the other hand, playing a shrewd hand. No undue risk, and Haslam's in behind him in 4th. Gardner's bike moving around a fair deal. Rob McElnay. Rob McElnay coming through on 5, and down the escape road goes Ron Haslam. But he's pulled the bike up, and at least he'll be able to rejoin. But a big lead, building all the time for Momola. Lawson, 2nd place, Gardner's 3rd, and he's got all ends sliding and in a lot of trouble, but he rescues it. And in the distance, in 4th place, Rob McElnay, he's on bike 5. Gardner, who had a name for wet weather riding until he tried to prove it in one of our 6-hour production races, and he crashed in the Dunlop Loop at Amaroo Park. So Momola 17 in front of Eddie Lawson, and he's 2 in front of Gardner, and it's a further 5 seconds back to Rob McElnay, and about 4 to Roger Burnett. Pretty close company with Didier de Radigues and the Cagiva. Rob Punt makes it back to the pits after his crash and says, not much fun out there. This man reckons it's a ball. And he loves it, and he loves risk-taking. And he just usually gets away with it. And I suppose if you're as good as Randy Momola, you can monowheel as well in the wet as you can in the dry. You've just got to make sure it's sitting a bit more upright before you get it to start monowheeling. You can brake very hard, surprisingly hard, while you're sitting up. Kevin McGee's having visor troubles, and it's misted up unmercifully. He's actually done a slow lap, planning to call into the pits and give it away, and then decides to keep going just to see if he can finish in the points, because if he finishes in the points, he gets an automatically allocated starting position in next year's Grand Prix. He can't be denied a start. Momola, and that really does give you an impression of how wet it is and how misty. And as bad as the adhesion is, the visibility is almost as much of a handicap. And he is going so fast, Randy Momola. Daylight second. Well, seemingly daylight, what there is of it. And again, the front wheel just lifting off the track. Momola well placed now as Eddie Lawson hooves into view. Wayne Gardner too in 2nd and 3rd place in this section of the race. But those 2 times to be added together to determine the final result. And Wayne Gardner the fastest in the first section, the first 5-lapper, virtually 1/4 of the race. and having plenty of trouble with adhesion. The Honda perhaps a little bit better in top speed and up high than the Yamaha, not quite as good and progressive and punchy out of corners, so that in the wet, the Yamaha perhaps just a fraction better. And certainly the Dunlop tyres appearing to be so, the tyres that are on the Lucky Strike team. After Kenny Roberts and Paul Butler did a deal at the beginning of the season, switching from Michelin's that they used last year. But now Randy Mamola back with the pack, back with Eddie Lawson, Lawson leading. So he's been down the escape road where Ron Haslam's been visiting, and he's thrown away that enormous lead and really the chance perhaps to have certainly pegged back Eddie Lawson, probably also Wayne Gardner. Now he really does have to work. But he's not afraid of a bit of work, is the freckle-faced Californian, the man who was racing in New Zealand when he was 15 years old, and Eddie Lawson, the fastest lap in the wet. So on Michelin's, 147.9 kilometres an hour. That really is flying, isn't it? On such a tight, twisty track that needs so much rider input and is so treacherous. You've got no chance of staying upright if you leave this little ribbon of bitumen. And Mamola's going to give Eddie Lawson all the pressure he can find. A very hard time coming up here. They got onto that grassy infield, they'd go hundreds of metres. But Eddie Lawson, no plans for that. They wind the throttles on together, and the gap that builds is only the difference in speed as the physical gap widens as the speed gets higher. The actual time gap between them doesn't change. So here, as they go slower, they close. A fraction of a tenth of a second between them. And Mamola not able to get round there and tries every side and doesn't stop trying. Goes again and falls back. And now Eddie Lawson having to make a decision, and he gets balked and Mamola gets balked too. Lawson through, leaves Mamola behind. But it won't do him much good, because the man on bike 3 is really on a flyer today. It's that little bit of determined magic that separates the racers from the riders. And Randy Mamola surely falls into the former category. A man who's been racing for more than half his life, although he's only 27 years old. Started when he was 11. Does it with as much deftness, as much cool and calm and daring as clerks wield pens in offices. He's ridden flat track in America, and that's one of the reasons, as with Wayne Gardner, that he doesn't mind bikes going sideways on bitumen. He's at home with them doing it on dirt with much more attitude than they ever get up on bitumen. All they have to do to be at home on bitumen is to build up their happiness with the higher speeds that are involved. Moment after moment. Fright for us, but not for Mamola. He presses on. Gardner's third, with 6 seconds still in hand. So 6 seconds behind Mamola there. And so his 13 chiselled back to just a bit under 7 to assure him of second place unless Mamola produces a little bit of special magic. And he's certainly trying to. Firstly on Eddie Lawson, and then to make the break on Wayne Gardner, an enormous tall order. But he will not stop trying. Gardner, his hands pretty full too, and no need, really playing it very sensibly, intelligently, as Momola, oh, with all ends going, the front lets go, the rear lets go, and somehow he pulls it all back under control, and he still doesn't give up in his pursuit of Eddie Lawson. And Mr. Smooth up front on bike number 1 wants to win this race. And he's trying hard too and doing a little bit more smoothly. But it doesn't take away from the fascination of this battle. Two such different people in character, in riding style, in determination, in ambition, in achievement. So equal at this moment in this 7th round of the World 500cc Championship. 16 rounds scheduled for this year. Lawson leads Momola and builds his lead a little bit. And for most people, that would be a decisive gap. It would have done the job. And Eddie Lawson could go unchallenged to the flag. With 1 lap remaining, he starts out now with an enormous job for Randy Momola, Mr. Never Say Die, out after him. Lawson doing it just the way he likes to do it. Smoothly, perfect lines, working beautifully with the machine. No moments, plenty of speed, flow, smoothness, and he leads the race. On the same tyres, very similar to Wayne Gardner's. Visibility, diabolical. Grip, poor. But skill, ability, dedication, there in abundance. As Randy Momola gets closer again to Eddie Lawson, somehow, mainly with daring, pulls in the gap and is out after him on this final lap, the 15th of this segment of the race, the 20th overall, and suddenly gets up so close to Eddie Lawson. Does Lawson know he's there? And he has one slice at him. And almost invisible in the mist, Lawson maintains, and gee whiz, Randy Momola should have been off, but somehow held on. And amazingly, didn't and doesn't give up. Comes again at Eddie Lawson. And he winds it on earlier and harder than Lawson as he gets out after him, and he wants a victory in this segment of the race. It won't give him victory overall. It won't give him victory over Lawson. It won't give him victory over Gardner. He was 8th in the first segment. He needs a much bigger break than this, but he's still prepared to stick his neck out for everything. And this is what makes great races on cars or bikes. And Randy Momola gets up alongside and Lawson edges him out on this thrilling final lap where there's been so many challenges and still the argument unresolved. Momola comes again and goes down the inside, but Lawson slams across and there's no gap there. And now through these tight turns in the infield on this narrow Assen track, he comes again at Eddie Lawson and he ranges up absolutely side by side. He's totally offline. He misses the apex, but he goes through as Lawson says, "This is no place for me," and the man's half out of control and he wins that 15-lap segment of the race. And Eddie Lawson's flabbergasted. This is how it happened. And then the man on number 1 wouldn't be sucked into trying to argue with that sort of determination as number 3, Randy Momola, went through for his own special reasons and hung on to an impossible situation and made it work and came home winner of that 15-lap segment. But the winner overall was Eddie Lawson from Wayne Gardner, 2nd. And Randy Momola, the daring Randy Momola, the racer to the end, 3rd. And happily, Victorian Kevin McGee, 10th, 1 point so guaranteed of starts in next year's Grand Prix season. There you see that with 6.5 seconds Lawson to Gardner on the cumulative time, and it was more than 6 seconds back to Momola third, followed by McElnay and Haslam. Giving us this point score, Gardner with a lovely 19-point break over Momola, still Lawson the defending champion.